what kind of advice and what's going on with these generational gaps, the generations?
Well,
You
first
looked
off,
it up earlier.
yep. For the first time ever, I've done some research on a Wise Old Bastards episode.
Wow.
First time ever.
Wow.
And in terms of possibly still living, maybe 3 or 4 guys left, and then living generations, so not going back 10,000 years. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 main generations. I'll just read them off really quickly
Really?
first, and we'll go back.
Okay.
Right? So people born in 1901 to 19... okay. People born 1901 to 1927 were called the greatest generation.
Really?
The greatest generation, yeah. So these are guys who, they basically, this is the guys who were like adults during World War II and the rebuilding after. And this is obviously from a Western
and World War I,
point of view. Well, they would have been born. Yeah, some of those guys might have been stuck in World War I.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Might be.
Again, remember this is from a distinctly Western point of view, right? This is not this is not what the Chinese would say. I don't know. Actually, that's an interesting point.
I don't think
whether other countries call them Gen Zs or not. Anyway, the next cohort was 1928 to 1945. They were born. They were called the silent generation.
Okay.
And that's interesting.
Silent.
Part.
Why so silent?
No, it's the interesting thing because they the guys who went through World War II, then the rebuilding, were quite happy to still be alive and vibrant and one. They're making all kinds of noise, right? The silent generation are people who were like basically born during the Great Depression, so they were through the Depression when they were kids, and when they were adults, it was tail end of World War II, but the Korean War as well. But what's interesting about these guys is they're actually considered to be the happiest generation alive. Interesting.
Because they were silent? I mean, come on, they were through the Depression. That's depressing. That's in the name.
Yeah, but they're not there now.
So happy.
Because they're not there now.
The Depression was a lot of happy people running around. There were people jumping off buildings back then.
Yeah, but those were the sad bastards, and they're gone. The guys who were left aren't in the Depression anymore. They're happy now. Then you've got what I believe should be called the greatest generation, the fantasticest generation, is the baby boomers. Born in 1946 to 1964. Hooray. They're the best. Shout out to baby boomers everywhere.
Yeah, that's where we are. We're following that part. Yeah, baby boomers.
All it means is our parents lived through the war and had a lot of sex. But anyway, that's why we're here. So,
exactly. Rebuilding the population. So, I mean, actually, the parents part is really helping the world. Huh?
Yeah,
doing all that sex.
A few little interesting snippets about that whole cohort. Currently in the United States, anyway, it's 21% of the population falls into the baby boomers. But nearly 50% of all the elected officials in the states. So less than a quarter of the population are that age.
Really?
But almost half of elected officials are in that age group. Plus, then you have in the American politics, you have people from the greatest generation, I think, still hanging around in office now.
A few, yeah. There's a couple of those.
So the baby
some of those
boomers
need to retire, though. That's true.
Yeah, so the baby boomers have outsized influence based on how many there are. They're the richest generation so far. And they will have big effects on politics for aging and healthcare, retirement, stuff like that, right? Because there's like, hey, it's my time to start taking now. So,
well, right now, yeah, exactly. But healthcare doesn't give; they just give a lot of shit and huge bills.
So
you don't want to get sick anymore. That's a problem.
Yeah. Then from 65 to 80 is called that's Generation X. Interesting about that is
Gen X.
From the boomer generation, we often started looking at those guys as slackers and things. But what some studies say, that generation cared less about getting to the top or into the upper crust of society. So we call them slackers, but they say, no, they
Okay.
just have a different definition of success. Yeah,
Okay.
They grew
Interesting.
up just around when the dot-com bubble and then crash, right? So
Yeah.
they had they had like money issues, but they've rebounded nicely, and that's currently the generation most likely to be able to afford a house. Which I don't know how that jives with saying the boomers are the richest,
Okay.
or the Gen X can
That's a good
afford a
point.
house and boomers can't.
Well, boomers are mostly already have houses and stuff, of course. I mean,
guess that's it.
because we lived earlier, so when housing was more affordable and developing.
What's your claim to fame? I lived before you, man. I was okay. Then we get to the millennials, which is 81 to 96. All right. Now, interesting. I never really thought much about this, but those guys, they grew up. Their defining moments were like 9/11, and then the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And they were the first generation to start experiencing serious polarization in American politics based on 9/11, Afghanistan war,
Okay.
Iraq war happening. So they were the first ones to start experiencing that. So before that, apparently everybody was like all pulling together and just USA, didn't care. Now, then it started getting people who had different views on it, I guess. Then you get into the Gen Zs, 1997 to 2012. That's the first generation that grew up with the internet and with phones, right? So they're the first digital natives. For them, online is like that's as real as offline. Yeah. But interestingly, okay, so this is the first generation that grew up on the internet. First generation that is digitally native. It's also the generation that has the least positive outlook on the future and has the highest percentage of mental illness.
With internet. They grew up with access to everything. I mean, information age is transitioning between Gen X to Gen Z, and Gen Z really just they grew up everything. They had probably iPhones in their cradles at that time. So basically, they can't live without it. You know, we had a telephone that.
You had a telephone
with a wire.
Yeah, you guys must have been rich. You had a phone.
Wow. No. But remember, we used to have a party line. Don't forget that. Remember the old days where the telephone was mounted on the wall and the thing would ring and you pick it up and it's like, Charlie, who? No, it's like, no, wrong line.
Yeah,
you just pick up the phone nowadays, try to make a phone call, you hear other people talking. It's like, what?
Yeah, so I mean, now you have a special fancy app on your phone to get 5, 6, 8 people involved in conversation. When we grew up, that's what it was because you were all sharing the one phone line.
Exactly. So, you shared one line. That's right. There was a party. You didn't even want one sometimes. You got one. Yeah, Gen Z is different. Very, very different.
The last one is the Generation Alpha. Born 2013, right up until now, 2024. They're the first iPad and Instagram. Yeah, iPad and Instagram came to light while they were growing up. They're the first real screenagers. Yeah. So Gen Z grew up with the internet, not as much with the phones, right? It was still on a computer, and it morphed in phones toward the later end of that generation, but they're not all phones. So the alpha guys are the ones that are screenagers. They're grow everything on the phone. They are currently shaping the social media landscape. They are the current pop culture influencers and emerging consumers. Now, having said all that, what do we want to say about these consumers?
Because
Mama, buy me this.
I mean, come on. Gen Alpha is a bit still like less than 10 years old, right? So 13 and younger. So they're the kids of today and the future of tomorrow.